we are getting into Ottawa now. Sort of. We're on the highway.
That was the BBC on CBC Radio 1.
Look, they have advertisements for Little Italy in Chinatown now. Did you see that? Officially opening right now. I think the airport is open all the time, but the wickets are not.
Good morning at 5:30. It's Tuesday, December the 29th. My name is Stu Mills, and this program is called Ottawa Morning.
This used to be my anniversary.
Cloudy today, a 40% chance of flurries in Ottawa early this morning, clearing later today. Winds northwest 40 kilometers per hour and gusting to 60, and they fall back to 20 kilometers per hour early this afternoon. The high today minus 13, but with those strong winds, most of the day will give us a wind chill of minus 30. Tonight, a few clouds, the low back to minus 19. Wednesday, a mix of sun and cloud, the high minus 5, and for Thursday, cloudy, a 70% chance of some flurries, and the high minus 2. Friday brings some snow and the high minus 3. In Ottawa this morning, light snow falling, minus 17. The strong winds, they're northwesterly this moment, 37 kilometers per hour. That gives us a wind chill of minus 30. We're reaching a wider listening audience this morning, so let's go through some of those towns. Kingston's at minus 17 right now. Northwesterly winds there too, and that's a wind chill of minus 27 in Kingston. Pembroke, clear skies, minus 20. Winds are at northwesterly 13, and that gives Pembroke and Renfrew and Petawawa a wind chill of minus 28. Maniwakie's at minus 20, a minus 28 wind chill there. And in Cornwall, this morning, relatively warmer, minus 14 degrees. Winds are from the west. In Cornwall, they're 26, and that means there's a wind chill of minus 24 in Cornwall. Giacomo Panico is in with news headlines. Good morning, Giacomo.
Good morning, Stu. The Ottawa man accused of starting a fatal fire in an apartment building on Christmas Eve is scheduled to make his second court appearance later this morning. 23-year-old Ali Asaki already faces one count of second-degree murder and arson with disregard for human life. Police arrested him on Christmas Day. That was after firefighters scrambled to contain a fire on the second floor of the 15-story Playfair Towers in Alta Vista. 4 people were taken to hospital. 2 have since died, including a 57-year-old woman. An Ottawa taxi driver is suing the off-duty police officer he claims beat him. The altercation happened this past May. That's when Sammy Aldeboni says Constable Sheldon Safrick beat him and uttered racist slurs. Aldeboni now wants $675,000 in damages. The Ottawa Police Services Board and a pair of unnamed officers are also named in the lawsuit. The power's back on for thousands of people in eastern Ontario and western Quebec. Close to 10,000 homes were left in the dark for 3 days following the Boxing Day ice storm.
Wow,
Mild weather after the storm made life difficult for crews as wet, heavy snow caused branches to fall onto power lines. The hardest hit areas were Cantley and La Pêche on the Quebec side and north of Sharp Lake on the Ontario side. 2 construction workers escaped an explosion in Old Ottawa South yesterday. It happened just after noon at a home being built on Grosvenor Street. The ensuing fire destroyed the house, but firefighters were able to save the neighboring homes. Damage is estimated at $500,000. The Red Cross says donations made after the Asian tsunami 5 years ago have gone a long way. The organization raised $360 million at the time. With the money, they've been able to build 6,500 earthquake-resistant homes. An Ottawa-based Red Cross employee who's been working in the tsunami-affected areas says the agency has helped thousands of survivors rebuild their lives following the loss of their family members. And finally, Stu, teenage hockey players from around the world are in Ottawa to lace up for the world's biggest Atom and Pee Wee hockey tournament. The Bell Canada Cup starts tomorrow morning at arenas across the city. Nearly 500 teams are competing, including teams from Russia, China, Finland, Switzerland, and Germany, as well as Canada and the US. The tournament runs until January 3rd, and it's estimated it will bring over $15 million into the local city coffers.
Okay, thanks for that. That's the CBC's Giacomo Panico. Now, Simon Dingley is with us to talk more about sports. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, Stu. In the NHL last night, Mike Camilleri scored the Montreal Canadiens' 20,000th regular season goal, but it wasn't enough as the Senators stopped the Habs 4-2 at Scotiabank Place. The Sens won their second match in a row, despite being without their two biggest stars, Jason Spezza and Daniel Alfredson, who are both injured. Danish rookie Peter Regan had a goal and an assist for Ottawa. Ryan Shannon, Chris Campoli, and Chris Neal scored for the Sens. The Ottawa victory marks the end of Montreal's 4-game winning streak. Benoit Pouliot had the other Montreal marker. Other NHL scores: Columbus blanking the Red Wings 1-0. Freddie Modin getting the winner in overtime. Rene Bourque had a hat trick as Calgary dumped Edmonton 4-1. The Oilers have now lost 7 in a row. Elsewhere, Carolina surprised Washington 6-3. Eric Stahl with a 5-point night. Tampa Bay edging Boston 2-1. New Jersey got by Atlanta 3-2. Minnesota over LA 4-3. San Jose knocking off Phoenix 3-2. Stu, at the World Junior Hockey Championships in Saskatoon, Jordan Everly had a goal and 4 assists as Canada blanked Switzerland 6-0. Brandon McMillan had 3 goals for Canada, but the Canadians will get a much tougher test tonight when they play Slovakia. Puck drops at 8 p.m. Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia's Sidney Crosby named Canadian Press Athlete of the Year. It's the second time Sid the Kid has won the award. And Stu, gossip out of Washington says Capital star Alexander Ovechkin could be named the new captain of the team. Yesterday, the Caps traded their longtime captain Chris Clark to Columbus.
That's interesting. I guess he's young, but not the youngest who might face that kind of work. So that
I don't think he's the youngest. Off the top of my head, I can't think of it. But you know what? The NHL would love this, too, because he's very exuberant. He's very outspoken. It's the kind of thing they need, whereas most people couldn't name the current captain of the Capitals, Chris Clark, whereas everybody knows Ovechkin. So the NHL is all over this. You can bet it'll happen.
Okay, very good. Thanks for this, Simon.
Thanks, Drew.
That's Simon Dingley with sports. Giacomo, did you have a nice break? Got a few days off. You were in yesterday.
I was in yesterday, and Christmas Eve here till 6 o'clock. Who's counting? Who's keeping track? No, it was a good time. Headed up to the cottage, Carol's cottage in Bedwell, and got to see my dad's nativity scene, which is a big thing for him.
What do you mean? Literally, like in the front yard, or the sort of?
No, it's actually in the living room. He takes the size of a good-sized dining room table to make a nativity scene with real moss. He collects the moss in September and October, keeps it moist.
Where does the moss come into play in the nativity scene? Just as sort of background?
Because there's a whole landscape. You have huts. There's about 20 different little huts that he makes out of like birch bark and moss. There's a water fountain.
This is a wider shot than most nativity scenes. They're usually a tight shot right on the manger, but this sounds like it's a bit further back.
This is like the whole town of Bethlehem.
And when you were in Valdemont, did the power go out? Were you without electricity?
I left before. I saw the freezing rain morning coming in and said, I don't want to be stuck there. No offense, with my parents had a cottage, so I bolted. I called them, they were without power for a couple of days. So I'm going to rescue them.
That's good. You know, because I live not too far from Valdemont, 15-minute drive, and I forget which night of the week it was, probably the 26th, and we were trying to watch a movie and everything on the power flash out, so it didn't stay out for very long. It would be out for a couple seconds, but it meant you had to turn the TV back on, turn the DVD player back on, go to the scene selection, find your scene, go back and restart the movie from the scene. I mean, at least you can do that, but
that's why they invented board games.
Yeah, that's true. That would have been maybe a better use of our time. Anyways, it was rough weather, but we made it this morning. This morning I tried to get out of my driveway, and just the smallest incline, but because the snow was soft over the holiday and then froze into this really thick, hard crust, I couldn't get enough forward momentum to, it's kind of as though there was a speed bump right in front of my wheels. I couldn't get going, so I tossed this chain under the one wheel that was getting some traction, and there you go.
And you made it. You saw your car, though. It looks like it could use a little thought in.
That's what the underground parking's for.
There you go.
Okay, it's 5:38 and very cold outside. Cloudy with a 40% chance of flurries this morning. Will clear later on, but strong winds through most of the day. 40 to 60 kilometer-an-hour winds this morning. They fall back to about 20 kilometers per hour this afternoon. The high is -13, but the wind chill is -30 through most of the day. Tuesday night, a few clouds, the low is -19. For Wednesday, sun and cloud, the high -5. And for Thursday, cloudy, a 70% chance of flurries, the high -2. Now right now in Ottawa, light snow falling, -17, a wind chill of -30. Kingston's at -17, the wind chill there is -27. Pembroke clear and -20, -28 is the wind chill up in the valley. Maniwakie's also at -20, wind chill -28, and in Cornwall, comparatively warmer, -14 degrees in Cornwall, but still a wind chill of -24. It's time now for the Business Digest with Tracy Johnson.
Good morning, I'm Tracy Johnson. Each morning this week we're talking to one of our favorite commentators on Canada's economy and markets. This morning Patricia Croft is here to talk about the economy in 2009 and what we might expect next year. Patricia is the chief economist with RBC Global Asset Management. Good morning, Patricia.
Good morning.
So the Canadian economy did creep back into the black this year toward the end of the year. What did you make of the economic performance sort of as compared to what you were expecting in January?
Well, it was a remarkable year, and indeed, if I look back to January, at that point, things were very bleak. The world economy had tipped over into a deep, synchronized recession, the worst recession in 80 years, and back in January, no one really knew where bottom was. But indeed, looking back, a recovery did unfold. We had barely back in the black. Third quarter GDP growth was very lackluster at just 0.4%, but it is a recovery nonetheless. But at the start of the year, I think there were very few people predicting that the Canadian economy would indeed return to the black by the end of the year. The unemployment rate, of course, ticking up significantly, but to over 8.5%. But in general, I think the year ended on a much brighter note than would have been expected at this time last year.
And the housing market really played a role in that. That was a surprising performance from housing, wasn't it?
It was an astounding performance from the housing markets all across Canada. And indeed, I think if we look back at the year, it was a year of a two-tiered economy for Canada. What I mean by that is the Canadian consumer actually fared quite well. Record low interest rates and some increase in consumer confidence caused people to stampede the housing market, taking advantage of softer prices, and that caused house prices and home sales to soar in every market across Canada. And indeed, by the end of the year, we had many commentators questioning if we had a bubble in the Canadian housing market, and the Bank of Canada even taking the very unusual step of warning Canadians that record low interest rates are not here to stay forever, and indeed watch out if you piled on too much debt, particularly too much mortgage debt. So that was the consumer side, very, very robust, but at the same time, huge volatility in the Canadian dollar over the course of 2009, and that really weighed on our exporters and manufacturers. Again, some better signs by the end of the year, but we definitely had this bifurcated, this two-tiered economy, the consumer doing quite well, but manufacturers and exporters really kind of suffering through the year.
Interesting, though, that consumers are doing reasonably well given the job market was very weak throughout the year. I mean, what are we expecting looking ahead? There's always so much talk about jobless recoveries. Do you think that we'll see something like that in 2010?
Well, I think Canada already is in the midst of a recovery that comes complete with jobs, because we did see that late in the year, the employment numbers began to turn positive, and the unemployment rate started to tick down. So I think that's a very good sign for the Canadian economy. Now, a lot of those jobs are coming from the construction sector, not surprisingly, given the strength in housing, and also a little bit in terms of the public sector as well. But I think if we look ahead, 2009 was a year that was all about stimulus. 2010 is going to be a year all about exit strategies, because now we are in a recovery. Increasingly, central bankers and governments are going to be thinking about unwinding all that tremendous stimulus that was put into place that really drove the recovery of 2009. So what it means for Canadians is watch out, because June 30th, the Bank of Canada has promised to keep short-term interest rates at a record low until then, but July the 1st, we could very well see the first rate hike in Canada in quite some time. And remember, the neutral setting for short-term interest rates in Canada is about 4%. So right now rates are at 0.25. So we could very quickly get back to 4% if the Canadian economy is on sound footing. And I'd have to echo Mark Conry's concerns that may cause a little bit of a shakeout in the housing markets in particular.
And what about the private sector? There's, as you said, this was the year of stimulus, which sort of bridged us over the economic downturn. But are we expecting to see the private sector step up next year?
Well, that's one of the big questions as we head into 2010. And I think there's no debate about the fact that we are in a recovery, but I think there's enormous difference of opinion about the sustainability of this recovery, because so far there are very few signs that this recovery is self-sustaining, and that's what central bankers and governments will be looking for, that we hand off the baton from the public sector and all that stimulus to the private sector. Now, Canada, I think, is in pretty good shape in that regard, because again, the consumer is out there spending, particularly on houses and cars, but that has to be supported by continued job growth. So I think the labor market for me is a key indicator to watch in 2010, not just in Canada but in the United States, because to have a sound recovery with robust domestic demand almost entirely depends on the labor market. So that is one of the key indicators that I think investors should watch as we head into next year.
Thank you very much, as always, for your time, Patricia.
Thank you.
Patricia Croft is the Chief Economist with RBC Global Asset Management, and that is the Business Digest. I'm Tracy Johnson.